Hello and welcome to another weekly episode of the Beer Fridge Podcast. On this week's episode, what is the meaning of beer?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes, sure, home of real beer, real breweries, real opinions, the Beer Fridge Podcast. As always, wherever you listen to this episode, make sure you subscribe, hit that ding-a-ling-a-ling to be notified of every single episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please do exactly the same. You can show your unofficial support by giving us a 5-star rating, or your official support by heading to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Beer Fridge Podcast. As always, my name is Gavin. I've got my drinking friends, I've got MD, and I've got Scott. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening. Tonight, we are joined by bona fide king of beer, a writer, a filmmaker, and author, of well known for his contributions to the craft beer community, founder of YouTube's craft beer channel, and recipient of multiple awards, including the Guild Beer Writers UK Writer of the Year. His books, Beer School, A Year in Beer, adorn shelves of budding podcasters and beer enthusiasts across the world. And his recent book, The Meaning of Beer, explores culture and historical significance of beer, tracing it from its influences in society from ancient times to modern society. Welcome to the podcast, for his third time, hat-trick appearance, Jonny Garrett.
I need you as A, to speak to my mother and explain that what I do is legit. And B, is just my hype man, just wherever I go. If I walk into a shop, it'd be great if you could just be there to, explain the awkwardness that's about to ensue.
That could have been the best intro Gav's ever done, ever. Honestly, I was waiting on him going down into like Bruce Buffer kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like fighting out the red corner or something. Well,
I'll pull a little bit behind the curtain. I can't take all credit for that. Gil wrote it. I just said it.
God almighty, fanboy Gil. I would have expected anything less.
I can write a good game. Talking's not really my strong point, but if I get the chance to draft it 8,000 times, I can come up with something pretty decent. And it was even spelled right, so that's fine. I'm taking credit for that. Welcome, Jonny.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it, as always. We will do as we normally do on the podcast and go round the virtual table and see what was in our glass to kick things off.
Let's go around the table.
Hey, what you got, Sam?
I'm on Howling Hops this evening.
Ooh.
I had a total craving for like a dark beer today, and just it's been one of those typical miserable dark Scottish nights, and I've opened the coffee and cacao porter at 5% called Franklin's Porter from Howling Hops, and it's just everything that I was hoping for a dark beer tonight. It's proper bitter. The cacao nibs are coming through with a bit of a punch. The coffee just sits really quite well balanced, and it's like buttery smooth. In all honesty with you, it's ticking all the boxes. Howling Hops for me are a brewery that I probably should shout about a little bit more. I think the beer they make is incredible, and this is just another one to kind of add to the list. I've got a few that I'll be have reviews on, hopefully at some point, because they've been that good so far. But this is just ticking all the right porter boxes for me.
Good stuff. I have literally just finished a can from Williams Bros, and their Silver Lake West Coast IPA, 5.6%. This is a supermarket beer that I picked up this afternoon. I've got some nicer stuff, because this has actually hit the mark spot on in terms of West Coast IPA. I don't know how many Westies we've had that just aren't bitter enough, or bitter fucking just full stop. But this hits all the marks, nice and malty and bitter at the start, and then we get that pininess coming through the back. Lovely dry finish as well, which makes you want to go back for more and more, and especially for under £2. I'm no complaining. That can go straight in my basket numerous times. I'll be going back for more of that. So Williams Bros, Silver Lake West Coast IPA, yep, Thank you, sir. I've got a black IPA coming up next, which will be good stuff. Gilroy?
So I decided to go, since we've got the blind taste tester himself. I went through and watched a few craft beer channel videos, as you can imagine, in prep, and landed on the wheat beer, the Weiss beer version, and picked up some Andex as a result. 20 bottles thereof. So everybody everybody that lives within a decent radius knows what they're getting for their Christmas. If I don't drink it all first, it's just so Moorish. I had after our week of being at the awards and stuff, and by the time Friday 3:30, 4 o'clock hit, I was gasping for a beer, and poured almost two of them into my big kind of mass type jug, and wandered downstairs with the rest of the other one, and was met with an eye roll almost immediately. But it was absolutely worth it. It's like, you've just finished drinking beer on Wednesday and now you're back. But yep, that's what it is. So, and it's just superb. It's lovely, sweet, hits all the right notes. The tiny bubbles that you're looking for in a wheat beer as well, kind of bananas and spades. It's excellent, and I can totally tell, Johnny, why you picked it as your kind of top of the list on the blind taste testing that you did on the Weiss beer stuff. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's not always the ones that you expect to win in those blind taste tests, but I've loved Andex, and so has Brad, for a long time. And it's one of those beers where I was fairly certain it was Andex when I drank it, because it's just such a signature aroma, and it is. It's not one of the best Weiss beers, it's one of the best beers in the world, I think.
It's incredible.
Cracking stuff.
Really, really good.
Johnny, what's in your vessel yourself?
So I'm on my favourite sort of underappreciated brewery, which is McColl's. So these folks from County Durham make what I sort of call crispy but aromatic beers. So regardless of the strength, it's crisp, it's clean, it's beautifully brewed, but it's always like got something big and exciting to it, whether it's a West Coast IPA or a dry hop pilsner, or in this case it's they've called it a dry noble beer. It's a saison, and on the back, where they do, a couple of breweries do this, where they put sort of the little dots that explain the intensity of different things. They've got sweetness, bitterness, and then saisonness. There's a marker of the style. It gets 5 dots, unsurprisingly, but yeah, it's big and really oily and phenolic. Lots of kind of clovey pear kind of character. Really oily on the palate, but they've used East Kent's Golding, so it's kind of nettily bitterness on the finish. To cut through that, and a hop I've never had before, which is called Tango. I would imagine they've called it Tango because it's got orange notes.
No, I was going to say.
And there is
Orange,
a citric
yeah.
kind of tang to it, but it could be from any of the ingredients basically in a saison. So I need to find a cleaner beer to try Tango a bit more.
Interesting.
Awesome.
That's
Sounds
such
good stuff.
I was going to say, that's such a McCall's thing to do, isn't it? Says on this, just to add that to the underestimated. Just
keeping it simple, or dodging the question. Depends how you want to look at it.
Indeed. Well, you've got you on for your hat trick appearance on the podcast for one very good reason. You've just launched a new book, The Meaning of Beer, and I suppose the most obvious question, the first question, was the inspiration for you to write this beer and how it came about.
Yeah, I mean, there's two answers. One is really quick, and it comes from my third book, A Year in Beer, and it was the discovery while doing the research around Munich and around the history of Helles and Märzen. I discovered that I didn't discover this. It was pretty well known. It's just that I learned it for the first time. That the fridge, or the first compressed gas viable fridge, was installed and designed in a brewery in Spartan Brewing. So that sort of set me off on this rabbit hole of trying to work out what other world-changing inventions have been put together for the purpose of creating better beer. But I would probably say the main reason that I wrote it, that could have been like, oh, that would be a good book idea, but I'll put it on the back burner with all the other ideas. The reason I wanted to write this now is because I essentially got sick of the question, like, is beer writer really a job, which I get all the time still, or sort of this sort of statement that it's just beer, stick to beer, it's not really that significant. in the grand scheme of things. And so what I wanted to do was to write a book that proved that, well, actually, if you said that in the 19th century in London, people would laugh in your face. They'd be like, no,
Yeah.
beer is the biggest industry in this city. It's one of our biggest exports around the world. And we are globally famous. In the 19th century, we were probably known for our empire, our navy, and our beer were probably the top three things that Britain was known for. And we've slightly lost that to some extent, but there's other nations that have been through that kind of phase as well. And a lot of the book dwells on sort of Bohemia and Bavaria, where it has quite literally changed the landscape of that Central Europe.
The other bit as well, like it's the approach that you've taken in terms of researching for this book. People could have quite easily, and yourself included, could have just sat there on Wikipedia and just Googled it, but you've taken the effort to look through the spans of history and the culture and the science of these things, and you've actually taken time to go to these places and physically see them and proper dive deep in it, because we can all search shit on LinkedIn and Wikipedia and all that kind of aspect, but I think especially for a reader, if you know that person's taking the time, it just sits better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it also gives a lot more colour. So lifting the veil a little bit, the first chapter is actually the last chapter I wrote about my trip to Egypt to visit this 5,000-year-old brewery. And essentially, I've been trying to go there. I've been writing this book for 3 years. It was the third season that I tried to go there. They only dig up the brewery once a year, and then they bury it again to protect it. So each year, I'd email the head archaeologist and be like, can I come out this year? And there was always completely legitimate reasons why I couldn't. And then in the third year, I emailed him and I was like, the book comes out this November, like it's now or it's never. And he said, I'm so sorry, we're not actually going to dig it up this year because of the war in Gaza. Because although it's quite a long way, as far as I think the Americans concerned, it is a risk, particularly because it's students that do a lot of the work and the insurance, the risks, the politics of it was just too much to bear. So I had to make this decision. I spoke to a lot of people. I spoke to Brad, to my wife, to a couple of people who had helped me put the book together sort of conceptually, and said, do I bother going? Because I won't be able to see the brewery itself. And I sort of realized that the only way you could truly tell that story would still be to go. For one, because the bit that the brewery helped build, the temples, the pyramids, everything else is very much out in the open. But the other thing is that it would be ridiculous for me to write about the history of a country and indeed the politics of archaeology in Egypt now without having witnessed it to some regard. And I'm so glad I did, because there's so many anecdotes, so many characters that I meet. The bit where I walk off into the desert with a man wielding a machine gun, those types of stories.
I listened to that part, and I was like, when you were describing it, and I was like, I can just see your face, and this guy's like, yeah, he's just round here, and I'm following this guy with a gun, and I'm thinking, I can just imagine. And I think he said something like, that'll be on the news, or it'll be YouTube or beer writer found or something, and I was just hee-hawing and laughing, just thinking, and I know I shouldn't be laughing at that, but at the same time, it's like the quest. It's like something out of, I was like, in my head, I had just pictured something out of like Indiana Jones, and Johnny's like walking, following this guy with a gun, like looking for the holy grail of beer, sort of thing. And I just think,
yeah, it definitely had that vibe. I wouldn't consider myself a particularly brave or adventurous person when it comes to stuff like that, but there was I was determined to get what I needed from this trip, but also, like, I'm not joking when I wrote about me, sort of these headlines going around my head, like, I think that was me dealing with the trauma of it, like me going, I just have to follow this man out into the desert. So in my head, I'm just making jokes about what the headlines will say when a corpse is found. So clearly that's how I deal with trauma, which is probably not their most healthy way to do it, but it helped with a chapter in a book.
It's such a good, again, look, it was interesting to hear that was the last one you wrote, but that obviously with the timing and stuff, but to open with that, it was just such an incredible, like, definitely the way to go in terms of structure. It was really cool to get that kind of opened up, because you're it is such a wide and vast, like, you've not picked a narrow topic. I mean, it's hardly anybody's specialist subject on Mastermind, is it? To say I'm going to do is how beer influenced the whole world. So how do you even get, like, how do you pick the? Obviously, there's you've mentioned Bohemia and Germany and the Czech and Czechia and places like that, which are obvious. We want to hit that point, and then, but how do you then structure the rest of? Well, I'm only going to go so many places. I can only touch on so many things. Beer's done loads. There's obviously so much that you can't even really pay lip service to. How do you structure it? Where do you start? How does it go?
Sort of most of the time, it actually kind of structured itself in like a huge proportion of the book is essentially me following the German diaspora that started in like the mid to early 1800s. So that kind of led me to very specific parts of the world, which was Germany, Brazil, China, where we've seen incredible Germanic influence in places that you just would not expect it. So essentially, yeah, the structure of it was A, in those chapters, the topics, whether it's politics, technology, or whatever, but B, it was just looking where the Germans went. Because although they weren't necessarily the originators of all that is sort of great and terrible indeed in modern brewing, they seem to be the people that would really sort of take it to heart and take it other places. Lots of the people that left Germany during that political turmoil did not want to leave, but they were wealthy, educated people who took all kinds of chemistry, philosophy, arts, writing, took loads of things abroad where they went, and brewing was clearly one of them. Whereas you look at, say, Czechia, which has an equally in-depth and equally sort of important to their national identity linked to beer, their kind of whole identity, because of the way that Czechia's role has been in politics in Central Europe, they wanted to stay where they were, and they didn't want to really take Czech beer culture out as much. So the Germans were like, we will go and be German everywhere. The Czechs were like, this is my homeland, this is where I want to stay. So their influence, although arguably as significant to Central Europe, didn't ever sort of spread. So yeah, it's follow the Germans.
Fair enough.
Can't really argue with that, I suppose.
Exactly. You can't argue too much. Sorry,
one
Gil.
thing, for me, it's I find it fascinating that we've been doing this for however long. We've been drinking beer since you can remember. I remember you talking about, everybody's have got a story about having their first beer with their dad and all that kind of stuff, and you strip it all the way back. And for me, like, listening through the book and reading, I find it really fascinating. My big thing, and I've said this like podcasts and we're doing stuff all the time, is about education. And I think the more you can educate people on beer itself, I think it pushes people. For me, it's about pushing people away from macro, and just for the sake of macro, it's like about, like, can we take beer local? Can we build these, like, there's communities within beer and things. And listening to you, like, strip beer all the way back and how it's had an influence in everything from, like you say, fridges to travel to railways being built to get people beer to and from, and things like that. I think it's just such a positive message that, if you're semi-interested in beer at all, I think it's a no-brainer to either download the book if you want to listen to it, or buy the book and read it, and because for me, the topics that come off the back of it, in terms of just educating and understanding where beer has, like, it's touched every kind of part of society, realistically. We're talking about something that we now take for granted. You kind of mentioned that at the start, like, in Britain, we were well known for our beer and things like that. And I think whether it's true abroad or not, I think we kind of really take it for granted in terms of the art and the skill and the science and everything that goes behind it. And I've still got plenty of chapters of the book to read, but so far I'm sort of thinking, like, it's just a great education piece, mate. Honestly,
I appreciate that, and I agree with everything you're saying. The only thing I'd want to add is sort of, I absolutely saw this book as a way of trying to say to people, beer really matters, and we should be drinking better, but it was, I was really keen to also write a book and to make an argument that even if you're just drinking Foster's, or if you're like my dad, you're just drinking beer door on a Friday, just having that awareness of the fact that beer didn't come from nowhere. That little stubby that you bought from Tesco's or Sainsbury's is the culmination of 13,000 years of bioengineering, of industrial revolution, of revolutions in other industries, in bottling, and it's part of Louis Pasteur's invention of pasteurization and the discovery by Lister that bacteria can infect humans. This is even the crappiest macro beer that was made in 3 days, consumed in 2 seconds, and not thought of again, is part of this process that completely changed the world. So, I mean, I hope that knowledge will drive people to try and explore and discover different things. But equally, if you just fucking love Skol, it's still a powerful thing to drink.
Because it's like, as like craft beer lovers, we're always quick and love to like diminish people that love macro beers and stuff. And why are you drinking that nonsense? You should be drinking X, Y, and Z. But these breweries have played a massive part in developing modern culture, like you said, and you touch on it on the book, even from like advertising, and we've mentioned domestic goods and stuff. And it's not just for the craft beer wank. This is just for people that love beer and want to discover how it's like globally. It's had a massive influence just on culture, just advertising, just everything in general. It's touched parts of things in the world that you maybe didn't even think of. Like we can shit on Foster's and that, and Budweiser and stuff like that. But Christ, like these guys made beer when in times and ages where it's probably the conditions were a lot more difficult than they were today. So
yeah, I mean, people died. People died making
Yeah.
beer. It was a pretty dangerous profession occasionally, and I think something that's really hit home for me, and I wouldn't say it's made me soften. It's made me definitely respect the heritage of macro brewers a lot more, because when Budweiser started, they would have considered themselves the 19th century version of craft. They were out there trying to make the absolute best beer that they could, and that is true of most of the brands. Carlsberg especially, their whole story, which I tell in the book, the sort of the struggle between father and son is to do with this idea of almost, do we start to compromise the quality in search of expansion, or do we try and hold on to it? And these breweries that we see of as sort of beer moths that don't really care about beer, that's only one part of their story. And it's definitely true. They care about producing a beer that sells. They don't necessarily care about creating great beer. Those two things they're not mutually exclusive. But yeah, they started out trying to make as good a beer as the craft breweries we talk about now. And you look at the news from Brewdog, whether it was yesterday or today, about how they intend to be a predominantly lager brewery going forward. And you start to go, well, hang on a minute, like you literally defined yourself against that.
Yeah.
To start with, and that is clearly the shift that Budweiser probably took about 50-60 years in. Exactly that decision.
Definitely.
Exactly that process.
It's
what's
crazy
been the sorry, Gil, carry on.
I was just saying that I'm going to dive into something specific in a second, but that journey for the father and son kind of battle that you're talking about is the difference between somebody like the brewery and the Vermont guys that make vocal banger and stuff like that. They're just like heady topper. They're just like, we're going to stop there. That's enough. That's where we're making the beer is of the best quality it can possibly be. We're going to stop. And then it's, well, no, there's a guy here who's got, we can refine this and we can tweak that and we can lager it for a lesser period of time and we can still get the same thing. And striving for that, they would have seen that as well. That's progress at the time. You can imagine the Industrial Revolution's happening almost under your feet at the same time, and everybody's running 1,000,000 miles an hour. You've got to keep, like, they must be feeling that they've got to keep up with that. You can imagine the pressure and obviously you've got young people that they're trying to make a name for themselves. How can I be different? Well, the quality's already there. How can I separate myself for that? Well, I'm going to make the same thing. I'm going to do it quicker. I'm going to do it be more efficient in doing so. And that'll be the bit that stands me apart, because look at all these. It's like now saying we're going to take stuff online and sell stuff online. The revolution of the internet pushes a lot of young people to say, well, I'm then going to create online, because that's where everything's happening. They're saying, well, everything's happening in industry at that time. So I'm going to go hell for leather and try and industrialize this process and make it as scientific as possible. That's how they stand themselves apart. The bit I wanted to dive in on specifically, obviously we are not there at the moment, but all kind of central Scotland based. So I want to talk about theft, Johnny. theft through a hollow walking stick of samples of some of Edinburgh's best beer taken away. You talked about follow the Germans. Well, them and their other Central European compatriots came over and stole beer from us, so effectively the best beer in the world, some of it anyway, at least the samples of that were taken in Edinburgh. So we are the birth of excellent beer, if not good beer.
You can try and make that claim. I don't know how far it will stand up. I appreciate the effort. I mean, what's in? You were paid handsomely.
Yes.
In the theft, in that you got the first ever lager yeast on the British Isles.
Yes.
The first ever lager produced in the UK was made in Scotland. So
It's just incredible to get a carry-on prank, like joke shop walking stick as well.
I mean,
Can you imagine the Scottish guy saying, like, what's he sticking that stick in there for? We don't know. He's German. He's German. You'll never work him out. Just let him.
Yeah,
get
we're
it.
German
Okay, no
custom. You bless it with your walking stick. I don't know.
He keeps sticking that in there and then running away. What's he doing that for? Just to know the different bits he can stick the stick. Right, okay, carry on. It's just superb. Such an interesting story.
It's one of those stories. I'm still not certain. You know, I'm still like, have I translated that right? Has the translator translated it right? Like a hollow walking stick. And this is pre-Ian Fleming. Like, where were they getting these ideas from?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no.
Exactly.
Too funny.
It's just that whole period just is totally fascinating with everything, and then you've got obviously everything happening in Edinburgh with like medical, the medical side of things. We're from Bathgate, or round about Bathgate anyway, the birthplace of James Young Simpson, which is he discovered the anaesthetic qualities of chloroform. You can just imagine him like in conversations amongst these, not amongst them directly, but round about that kind of same sphere, thinking about advances in antiseptic and anesthesia and things like that, all happening in the same place. It's incredible to think that beer not only fueled, I'd bet, some of those conversations, but also was the spark to think we'll just keep going and keep going. You mentioned Louis Pasteur. That whole thing is just mind-boggling, that it was all based on how I'm desperate to understand why this beer keeps going sour all the time. Yeah. And then it just mushrooms for there. It's incredible.
I found myself sort of thinking, as I was researching and writing, that wouldn't it have been nice in some ways to be around back then and for these scientific discoveries to have been incredibly exciting and have incredible immediate fairly immediate impact on society. Like nowadays, the great technological revolutions that sort of happen on the west coast of America at giant technical tech companies, when you hear the news, you're like, oh fuck, what now? Who's taking my job? How are we going to exploit the working class more? Whereas back then it was much more like, folks, like we worked out how to knock you out so you don't feel the pain. The knock-on effect of that is that we seem to be murdering more of you because we're getting a bit cocky about doing surgeries. But now we've found the solution to that. So it's just endless good news, I'm sure, for everybody in the 19th. But yeah, I mean, it was a remarkable time of positive discovery along with the negatives, I guess.
What's been like the most challenging part on writing the book, and kind of unexpected hurdles that you discovered along the way that you maybe didn't foresee whatsoever?
I mean, it's definitely that final chapter still keeps me awake at night, because it was it was one of those. It's the biofuel story, so it was the first thing that I thought of when I was like, "There's going to be a chapter on the future," like, you know, trying to say that beer's role in society is not done yet in terms of advances. And biofuels just leapt out at me. I already knew that it was genetically modified brewers' yeast that was doing a lot of the work. And so I was like, well, that's an easy win. You know, there's half a chapter in that. Great story. And as I began to dug into it, I was like, well, hang on. Like, as far as I can tell, and this is where because I do, you know, probably could trip me up in the future. But I consider myself a beer expert. I do not consider myself a renewable energies expert. So I was completely out of my depth from the moment, like, I realized the story was not that simple. And, you know, biofuels, as far as I can tell, are a positive change. Certainly better than digging up a fossil fuel and burning it.
True.
But they're not that much better. You know, it's not the elegant solution that BP would like us to think it is.
Mm.
And so as soon as you get into a grey area and you're a hobbyist in this field, everything you write, you're second guessing and you're worrying about. So I spoke to a lot of experts who obviously all have their own political view on it because the science isn't entirely decided on it. So navigating that and getting it right, yeah, still sometimes I lay in bed and wonder if I nailed it. And I make, I'll admit here, an absolute fucking clanger of a statistic in the final chapter, in which, like, literally just by getting two words in the wrong order, I imply that there's an area twice the size of France growing maize in America. and the truth of it is that basically, in total, biofuels grown in America is the area of France. So still an insanely inefficient process and mad amount of land used, but I double that insane statistic by getting my words in the wrong order. And that's because it went through 56, 50 or 60 drafts, I would say, that final chapter.
Christ.
And I still wasn't happy with it. And just, errors, typos. You know, it's like when the poor guy was proofing the book, it was like the first sort of 4 or 5 chapters that I'd written nearly 3 years ago at this point. I'd refined beautifully, very few notes. Final chapter, it was like, I do not understand this sentence. No human that can read can. Please reword. Like, yeah, that's been refined too many times.
It must be difficult and humbling, I suppose, to get, because people obviously publisher wise, they're reading the book for like exactly everything that you're saying. It's for errors, it's for spare, you know, like they're taking it in as like how we would read it. You know, you've spent years of your life kind of working this out and how is it going to fit. It must be really, I don't know if humbling is the right word or frustrating sometimes, is when getting those notes and someone saying, I don't understand this, and you're like, fuck, how can you know? You know, like...
Yeah.
You stupid.
There's a whole about 2,000 word scene that I wrote in Chicago that basically linked Chicago to St. Louis, and it was supposed to be like a foreshadowing of the final chapter where I talk about, because if you get a train, which I did from Chicago to St. Louis, it is. I mean, I made that reaction. Like, it sounds romantic as hell, right? Nothing but soybeans. Both sides for 5 hours. Like, and ironically, in the middle of it, there's a stop in a town called Normal. It is the most boring train journey I've ever taken.
Wow.
And so I set this up with a trip to Dovetail, an amazing sort of, I guess you'd say, Germanic-inspired brewery in sort of the suburbs of Chicago, where I have a great time learning about, especially telling the logical conclusion of where Germanic influence has gone in Chicago and the incredible beers that they make. That's sort of a call back to the homeland. And then I sort of say to them, like, I'm going to St. Louis. I'm going to the home of where, like, you know, the biggest influence that Germans ever had on a foreign country in terms of culture. And I can't wait for the train journey. And they're like, it's not the fucking Rocky Mountains you're going through. Like, it is just flat farmland for 5 hours. And
Plenty of room in the observation car on that particular train. You're not finding for space.
So I had what I think is a cool story, an interesting story, a foreshadowing for the final chapter. And my editor, who was a great editor, and he was 100% right in retrospect, just put a cross through 2,000 words. Just went, nope.
That's a gut punch there.
No.
And you know, he was right, because what it did is it slowed it down as we were essentially. I'd made the link saying Germans changed American culture and then waffled on about soybeans. So he just went, no, this isn't the right time for this conversation. Get to St. Louis, Johnny. So yeah, he was right. But yeah, it's pretty galling when I submitted that manuscript, except for maybe the last chapter, thinking it was perfect.
Yeah.
Or at least close to perfect. Or as close to perfect as I personally could get it. And then, yeah, somebody comes in and goes, literally 5% of the book. Straight back out.
Well, even I was the last chapter just.
I mean, he also, there was a savage note. So I say about halfway through the last chapter, I say something like, you might be struggling to see the link to beer here because all I've talked about is yeast. And he's just put a note just going like, yeah, I'm one of those people. Please edit. But again, it was a good note, and I went back and I think I fixed it. But yeah, it's when you're that close to something, you can't see the wood for the trees, and I needed somebody to go, watch out, there's some wood there, mate.
Oh, that's hilarious. I was giggling as well the other day. So you did your kind of live session on YouTube with the release of the book, and you did a couple of short videos on social media and stuff, and you started the live video by apologising to certain railways and stuff because you were getting what was it you said? Great British. What was it you said? You said
Midland
great
Railway.
That's the one.
Railway. Midland Railway is a railway. Great Northern Railway is a railway. Midland Railway is great with a small G because it's a really good railway, but it's not Great Midland.
And then it was even railway instead of railway, and it should have been train station.
Oh. Yeah, I mean that one I don't apologise for. They're fucking idiots. Like anybody who loves trains listening to this, you can call it a train station, right? The point of language is to make yourself clear. I don't understand what's unclear about train fucking station. So yeah, I don't apologise for that one.
I was just giggling so much.
It's typical that like I've only gone viral 3 times in my life, and 2 of those 3 times I've made an absolute clanger. Which I don't know, maybe it's part of the reason it went viral. Maybe I should embrace the mistake and go.
It's the human element.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's too funny.
Maybe I should continue to be slapdash in my videos.
Well,
I'm going to say, welcome to the podcast. You're in. This is we've done Flapdash for 6 years, mate. So.
Just before you move off, because the live thing's is a perfect kind of segue into it. I wanted to take we'll save you talking about the book for 10 seconds. I promise we'll get back into it. Drink Johnny dry. This is an incredible concept, and one that I'm raging we didn't come up with, because Mark in particular has got a beer fridge that, to say bursting at the seams is an understatement. Not quite to the extent of yours, I imagine, as you're about to tell us, but so walk us through what's Drink Johnny dry.
So this is a concept I'm working on, still trying to refine, but it would be a live show on the Craft Beer channel where I put my entire beer list, or a section of my beer stash, in a form, and people can vote on what I drink. So the more innocent among us would say that's like a choose your own adventure. The less innocent would say it's a weird form of OnlyFans.
Yes.
I drink essentially what people voted that I drank in a bid to get me through what I estimate, and I'm slowly cataloguing it, is about 450 unique beers. Like many multiples of certain beers. Yeah. Some of which go back. So I was drinking. We've done one live show. So half of my last live show was about the book, and the other half was Drink Johnny Dry. And I was drinking beers that were 12 years old. So actually bought by me before the channel started. And most of them were disgusting because they haven't been looked after carefully. So something I learned from that first session is like put some of the old silly shit in that hasn't been cared for, but also I have this fridge next to me, which is full of, if not fresh, stuff I've cared for, and would maybe be a bit more delicious, because it was supposed to be like I'll finish it if it's good, but I only came across one really solid beer in the 8 that I consumed on that night.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, if you guys enjoy the concept and you've got a stash, I think that once I've dialed it in and got that format right, it's ripe for guests to come and share their beer stash and have that on it.
Dark beers and stouts. all over there.
Tons.
I've got a stash of them that. In
that's-
fairness,
No, you can't-
with the change of my palate and over the last 6 years of doing this, I have started drinking stouts and porters. So I might just keep them for myself.
Some of them
But
are a
they've
bit
been
scary.
But they've been there for at least 6 years, to be honest. Minimum, some of them, which is scary.
The
And
question has to be, what's the one beer that you've got sitting that you want to open, but at the same time you think to yourself, it needs to either be a special occasion or I'm going to have to record this, or whatever it might be that has put you either off opening it. Is there anyone that comes to mind, or a brewery that you've got, or something like that?
There's a couple of them. There's a couple of lambics. I've got a Tilkan Gers squared, which is essentially an extra strong bottled Gers that he made as a one-off, because I think he had a batch that came out flat. He didn't get his blend right, so he essentially added some more fresh lambic, and the ABV therefore bumped up, and it's this big old
waft.
8 or 9% Gers. The main one though is I've got one bottle of the 2015 Bourbon County Stout, which is getting on for 10 years. So it probably means I should crack it next year. But the reason that that's special is because it was the last year that they didn't pasteurize it. So they had 2015 they didn't pasteurize it. 2016 they didn't pasteurize it and it got infected and they had to do a big recall. And 2017 it came back pasteurized. So it's the last one that will age in the way that the original brewers would have intended. So to me, that feels quite special because as far as I'm concerned, that's when AB InBev got their hands on Bourbon County.
Yeah.
So yeah, it needs to be a special occasion. It needs to be one where I will sit and finish that. If it's good, I'll sit and finish it. So I might, maybe next year finish a Drink Johnny Dry episode with cracking that.
No,
That sounds cool.
that would be incredible.
See, that's
also be
that's
messy.
twice now. Very messy. That's twice now I've heard you mention. So you've written a whole book about how Louis Pasteur and one of the best things that beers have parted on the world is pasteurization, and twice Moon Underwater, and now here you've mentioned it. your favorite things,
Yeah.
or a couple of the notables are things that are unpasteurized.
It's it's a real battle. Pasteurization changed the world in many regards, and changed beer. It made lager travel better. Essentially, is what it did, and that made American macro lager the thing that it is today. And I think that it'd be crass to say that was only a bad thing, but it definitely had an effect. I mean, most technological revolutions have their positives and their negatives, I think.
Absolutely.
And, it's actually Michael Jackson in his book, it's up there, Great Beers of Belgium. In the introduction, he puts it so fucking well. He's sort of like he's talking about language and the advent of literacy in Europe, and he says that that was the first step towards macro lager, because it says something like only then could the folly and the foibles of uniformity truly be expanded, or something more beautiful than that, because he's Michael Jackson. But yeah, I mean, with every great discovery comes somebody that will exploit that to the point where it becomes a negative again. And so, yeah, I mean, Louis Pasteur is now one of my great heroes. I said on the Moon Underwater, he's who I'd like to go for a pint with. And I still stand by that. It'd probably be a pint of wine in his particular, in his case. But yeah, pasteurization is, I think, an evil when it comes to craft drinks.
You've stole one of my questions there in terms of historical figures, so that ticks that one off. But are there any particular styles or brewing traditions that you discovered that you think would like to see more modern breweries kind of adapt or try and modernize and put in more modern beers?
Yeah, I mean, the joy of craft brewing, and one of the reasons that I love it is that most of it is being done. There's not many, in terms of styles, there's not many styles not being made.
Yeah.
Because we've seen all the history books. Nothing in my book discovers sort of new styles or processes really. What what I would like to see is books like mine, and there's lots of others. Martin Cornell and his Porter book, which is the definitive text for now, at least on the history of porters and what went into them. I think a little bit more respect for the traditions, a little bit less sort of arguing about the names around styles and stuff like that, and a little bit more conversation about the genuine flavors and heritage of them would be really helpful.
Yeah.
If we look back at, everybody argues about what's a porter, what's a stout. You look back historically, obviously a stout was just a strong porter, but you look at modern porters, you're like, well, those aren't fucking porters either. And I think just taking this longer view on the beer industry would really help us realize that most of the arguments we have are entirely irrelevant.
Yeah.
And we're not having the correct conversations about our heritage and about our styles.
I think that sometimes just to talk on the style thing, I think when a brewery adds a style or whatever it is onto a beer, it can either put people on or off the beer. And I know that's part of the whole marketing thing. You brand it as something to kind of fit a niche or fit a market that you're looking to target. And sometimes we've said it before, if it doesn't do what it says on the tin sort of thing, then you kind of score it down in a way. But sometimes I always think if breweries were just, they didn't put a name, or you just described the beer, or it was like dark beer 4.5%, and all you knew about it was dark and it was 4.5%, and you just had to pick it up. Well, I like a dark beer, cool. Pick it up, and I get whatever I get from it, and we take it from there. And I know some people hate that. I know, like Callum is here. He loves having all the hops, the brew, everything that's went into the beer. He loves to see it on the back of the can. And sometimes I do as well. But then the other part of me just thinks, let's just strip it back and let people's taste buds do the talking for you.
It's when we came up with silly new styles and stuff, and be like, oh, Mountain IPA, like just fuck off. Just stop it.
Mountain IPA is just someone that's made a batch of like a West Coast IPA, or no, made it bitter enough, or made a NEPA and went, it's too bitter. Right, I need to find a middle of the road or something, But
it's a bit clear.
It's the conversation.
I mean, I totally agree with you. Like, it would be great to avoid these conversations. I guess the conversation needs to be around what does the consumer need to know and what don't they.
Yeah.
And there's always this tension between what will sell the beer, how much do they need to know to actually make this purchase, and how much do they need to know to enjoy the beer, and often those kind of conflict. So I was just looking on this beer, so I just cracked a new one, which is now open in Transylvania. It's a Green Cheek West Coast IPA.
Nice.
There are no details on this other than what I've just told you. It says drink while smiling, which I love. But from
That's
it,
good.
I'm about 90% sure there's Nelson Sauvin in here, but I can't know.
Yeah,
and that's both joyous and incredibly frustrating.
yeah.
So it's true. I mean,
But is that not more frustrating from the point of view of you're going, I'm convinced there's Nelson there, and you want to just prove to yourself that it is Nelson?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it shouldn't affect the drinking experience really. I think it would be brilliant if beer cans and bottles had a flap on, and you don't have to see the info if you don't want to, because I think that it would be great if people drank more with their eyes, with their mouth, with their noses than with the expectation. And that's, I mean, the blind taste test that I do on the channel often prove that's the case. I'd have assumed that Heineken was a sack of shit, and as a company they're a sack of shit, but as a brewer they make significantly better beer than, say, Kronenberg, even though it's possibly even made in the same place. There's huge issues with that, and it really, it stops people like McColl's being championed like they should be. If somebody just approached their session IPA, stick it in a Cloudwater can, people would be like, oh, Cloudwater are back on form. Well, I mean, I'm not sure they were ever off it, but equally McColl's have been doing this since they made sort of the big shift after COVID.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I don't fully know what the answer is, and I know breweries have sort of flip flop. Some like Cloudwater is a great example. When they opened, it was all about seasonality. They went, people don't get it. They then put every fucking detail that they could: grams per liter, hop varieties, hop crops, yeasts. They did
hot
tests
side,
there.
cold side.
Yeah. And now you look at their core range and it's called Fuzz, and that's all you Fuzz is it, and that's all you know.
So
So breweries haven't figured out what's best yet, and maybe they have like a different, you know, maybe the core beers are different to the geeky beers, and that's probably the best approach we'll find. But I mean, I like to know because I have to educate. Don't have to. I get paid to educate, and so I always want to know
Love
the
to
details.
educate.
yeah,
My passion
exactly.
is educating people.
I think at this juncture it's a good thing because I think we've all recharged our vessels and we'll go around the table one more time.
Let's go around the table.
Go on then, MD.
I'm sticking on Howlin' Hops because I'm fanboying them today.
Here we go. I was thinking we would get a wee Heinzgebot lead in to a quick book reference.
That's
back
what I
again
was
with you
thinking.
with your hoodie and everything on. I was waiting for that. I worked for
I've
a brewery
got,
reference
still
to
in
come
work mode. I
sneaking
know.
in.
Knowing that Johnny was joining us today, I should have totally done a cheeky plug on the new release from West today.
You
the
should
old,
have.
Doppelbock. And I've got, if it's bad to say, I've got it sitting in front of me, but I don't have it packaged properly. And I didn't want to start talking about
Reveal
it. And
it.
Johnny's going to say, this beer sounds amazing. I'm going to have to get some. And let me see the bottle. And I'm going to have to show him no bottle. So I thought I'll describe it and then... Yeah, we can
Drink another beer. Yeah,
I'll
sounds
drink
good.
another beer, exactly. So anyway, I appreciate he's given me the opportunity to shout out about a new beer launch, but I'm on Howlin' Hops. Simple as. This is the Upper Crust Red IPA, 5.5%. Chinook, Cascade, and Centennial. So all the C's on here. And again, it's such a sessionable. Every beer I've had from these guys recently has just been unbelievably sessionable. Like, just I hate using this phrase, but it's the easiest way to describe it. It's like uncomplicatedly tasty. Like, there is. It packs loads of flavour. It's given me everything that I want from a red IPA. It has a maltiness. It's got like a proper caramelly kind of bitter aspect to it as well. There is a slight sweetness, but there's a tad bitterness. I would like more, considering the three hops I've just mentioned. I would expect more West Coast vibes to come through, but it's not as such. But it's really mellow in terms of its like bitterness aspects, but it just leans into that digestive biscuit meets kind of caramel vibes. It's just really tasty, to be honest.
Good stuff. I am enjoying a beer which I commandeered and removed from our visit at the Guild Awards on Wednesday. That was end of the evening, and the bar was running low, and they just said, just take them off the bar and off you pop. So fucking freebies, thank you. Twice.
The one that was within driving distance, and you get any more than 100 mils in their suitcase to bring back up the road.
I offered to bring them up to you when
I
I'm
know.
coming up, and you said no. Incidentally, I thought about this today. What did you? I must have gave you like 3 cans each, and you must have left
Well,
them
the
in that
guys at the
hotel room.
hotel are had a great night.
Aye, you could have given them to me. Yeah, swine. Do you know Twice Brewed? It's their original Bohemian Pils at 5.1%. Everything that you want for Bohemian Pils. Crisp, clean, that kind of traditional Czech style Pilsner. Lovely and grassy. There's a kind of a little bit on the back end. I want to say a bit of a spice coming through. I could be completely fucking wrong. But yeah, a little bit of a spice coming through in the back end for me, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. And I must admit, this is like, when it comes into marketing and stuff, when I seen this can at the awards and we were enjoying it, I assumed it was like a sour or something. Did not suspect it was a... It fucking says Pilsner at the bottom. Just shows how much I was not reading it. I just assumed it was some funky sour, but it's a lovely Pilsner, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. good stuff. Scotty, I've got a couple of freebies from the guild as well that I'm
shock,
diving in.
shock. Um,
Including my Bombay mix.
they were good.
They were clever, by the
Rose
way.
yeah.
They were incredibly tasty. I got my Bruiser box this month was Simple Things. So I, again, apt because we were going back into the history of beer, tried to go with that kind of theme, if you like. And they've got a Rauch beer, which was included in their box. So it's a 5.4% German style lager with smoked malt. And it does feel like, I suppose, if you were having a kind of old school, like proper, if you can imagine what beer of that style would be like. It's got that kind of smoky flavour. It feels like a kind of more kind of direct heat, if you like, on things, and it's just got that kind of additional bit of kind of complexity to it, which I know splits opinions amongst lager drinkers and stuff. It's slightly darker in colour. It was a wee bit closer to the kind of brown beer when I was listening to bits in the book. I was thinking that I saw it in the box and thought I'm going to stick that in the fridge and keep it because I knew we were talking to Johnny and we were going to be talking about the book. So I was like, I'll keep it for that. And it's excellent. It's got a lovely bit of sweetness to it. It does have that kind of complex. I can imagine kind of people smoke stuff generally. People have quite strong opinions on one way or the other because of their palate. I'm enjoying it. It's very Moorish, I would say. It's incredible. It's got kind of candied almost vibes to it. It's really interesting, an interesting drink, and Simple Things are incredibly good at interesting drinks. So, yeah, knocked it out of the park.
That's off. Some tasty beers, indeed.
And we've got your West Coast IPA, Johnny, which just says West Coast IPA. So
Yeah, well, I googled the hops.
Oh, did you find them?
So the hops on this are oh god, I've lost it. There we go. So it's Mosaic, NZ Cascade, and Citra. So no Nelson, NZ Cascade, and they're saying it's bringing a zippy. It said zippy citric character, which I think, when I smell Nelson, I smell green fruit pastels. That's what's always a marker to me, which is why we called our collab with Two Flints this year pastel. And I guess the NZ Cascade is maybe bringing that, or the Mosaic is really bringing that as well, and maybe the combination. But something is green fruit pastels here. And it's clearly how one particular oil from hops presents to me that I think must be in lots of NZ hops. I don't get it things like Motueka or some of the other New Zealand hops, but it's definitely here. But I mean, it's a stunning beer. It's Green Cheek. It was going to be stunning, and I have to thank actually forget his name, but he came to one of my book launches and gave me 3 Green Cheek beers, which is about as good a beer gift as you can get, really.
yeah, sounds incredible.
Am I right in saying from the I can't remember from the live if it was confirmed or not? Did one of the books actually make it to was it where was it, Tasmania? Remember at the very start, someone commented and you meant, I was like, what? Tasmania already?
So my local bookshop in Letchworth Garden City, a bookshop called David's, amazing bookshop. They ship globally. So when I found that out, I teamed up with them. I was like, I will sign every book you buy and just ship it worldwide. And they've done a truly remarkable job. They've sent out, we've sold, I think, over 200 books at this point, all over the world. So all people getting signed copies. So yeah, it's been cropping up in all kinds of locations that I just had no idea would. And I can only presume the shipping to Tasmania must be like 40, 50 quid. So yeah, whoever that was, I should actually, yeah, you're right. I should dig them out and say a massive thank you, because that is commitment. Although
It was the very start. I was like, what?
I'd also say that so like I'm now generally I spend my life scrolling through the comments on YouTube and going actually to people. At the moment, instead of doing that, I'm constantly refreshing Amazon to see how well I'm ranking. And also looking at the reviews and on the Goodread reviews and stuff like this, which is terrible for your mental health. But I got a review before the book even came out, a 3-star review. Like not even like just before the book came out, so you're like, oh, there could have been a leak here. No, it was like back in May this year. I was like, I was still proofing the book.
That's worse than Untapped.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as something goes live.
Don't like
sour.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sometimes skeptical. You know, and occasionally I still get comments. I got a comment on the YouTube channel as well saying like, "Hey, I love the book." You're like, "Book's not out yet, but thanks, I guess."
Thank you.
Yeah, so you take it with a pinch of salt. But I believe Tasmanian person.
I know. Hats off to that. That is commitment. So like, obviously the brewing world is over the last couple of years is just taking a hit massively in terms of government legislation, etc., and getting absolutely zero help. For yourself, like, what is the kind of biggest misconception of beer's kind of role in society? Like, it's paid a massive historical significance, as you've written in the book, and like, if you look at that and read through it, like, why, like, what the how come current brewing just does not get the help or the fucking plaudits that it should be to help society going forward? Like, what's the movement going forward? Because for me, if you go through the book, brewing's done such a massive thing. Don't know what happened there to my voice. So it's surely going to play a role going forward as well. But so why is it just getting fucked?
I mean, the answer to that is incredibly complicated, but the thinking behind it is, the answer is very quick, and that is, in this country, it's public health policy. So you look across to Europe and you look at nations that, you know, tax their beer exceptionally low. You don't necessarily see huge crises in alcoholism and alcohol-related diseases, in societal problems related to alcohol. You don't necessarily see it spike. And somewhere along the line, you know, it's a deep sort of socio-political conversation, but somewhere on the line in the UK, alcohol has been demonized to the point, you know, to a lesser extent than it was around like prohibition, but to a certain point where, and I think it comes from, you know, having free universal healthcare essentially means that people who don't drink lots start to judge the people that do, just like, you know, people who don't eat lots judge the people they do, just so the people that don't smoke judge the people that do. You know, it's saying, I'm paying for that. And I think that has a really powerful effect on how we talk about things that aren't necessarily good for us. It's starting to happen with sugar as well. The government is currently mired in, I was just reading some articles about this today, Boris Johnson introduced this mad thing to try and get people to, trying to ban advertising for certain junk foods, but he had no definition of what junk food was, no definition of what unhealthy food was, and as a result, things like olive oil got listed as unhealthy. I used to work with Jamie Oliver. I work with lots of nutritionists who would say, no, you fucking, you need these saturated fats in your diet, just only in certain quantities. But anyway,
it's crazy for somebody whose diet is almost exclusively smiley faces to make a call on junk food. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you can't imagine that he's
somebody that's having alphabetti spaghetti 3 days a week should not be
making his name in alphabetti spaghetti, going,
"Oh, yeah, that's where the
legislation
the legislation came from, mate."
But so yeah, it comes from that public health conversation, and you know, something that I've talked a lot about on the channel. I talk about it in the book quite extensively as well. Is the fact that we need, because you know, I think that alcohol policy is entirely failing in the UK. It is not protecting the people that need protecting, and it is not giving the freedoms to people to fully express themselves and live the lives that they want to effectively through absurd taxation. So a proper look needs to be had at the approach, the public health approach to alcohol, and a proper approach, in my opinion, is a holistic view. So you could look at, I mean, maybe don't reference my book in Parliament, but look at the effect. Actually, fucking do, because you might buy it. the policymakers need like a meta study that looks at not just the effects of alcohol on the body, not even just the effects of alcohol on, the stuff that I mostly talk about in the book, which is, human history and the future of humanity. It's also looking at stuff that I do reference in the book a fair bit, which is things like loneliness, things like societal cohesion, things that have genuine, provable, or proven, I should say, effect on quality of life and life expectancy. And however much temperance campaigners want to argue that it doesn't, there is still the J curve. The J curve still shows that if you drink moderately, and moderately is, a good couple of pints a week. It's not a current, basically 3 pints a week and you're done. You are projected to live longer. And we need to have these holistic debates and these holistic studies that show the working behind that and the impact of it, because it's very clear to me that there is not a direct link between life expectancy and alcohol consumption if you look at other nations. And that is probably the biggest thing I think that's the biggest conception with alcohol. Alcohol is a dangerous substance. In large quantities, it is poisonous, but all things are. It's just at what point it becomes poisonous. And I don't think that UK public policy has found that switch. And obviously it's not going to be a switch. It's going to be a gradient, and it's going to depend on whether you're male, female, obese, thin, what race you are, what class you are to some extent, what food you eat, what you can afford, everything that feeds into this. And having a policy that goes men and women should only drink 14 units a week is scientifically, morally, and practically complete nonsense. There's nothing backs that up. There's not a study in the world that would say this is the correct
Not a
policy.
single thing. I mean, the amount and this speaks volumes of the place I live more so than anywhere else. But Scotland, we've got minimum alcohol pricing. I walk 2 dogs 3 times a day. We've got minimum alcohol pricing, and it's not done anything to change the number of dragon soup cans I've got to pick up and put in the bucket or see as I'm walking past from there. All it's done is what I need to do is I need to take the volume of liquid that I need to consume and the chances for me to be absolutely blitzed and mess with that ratio enough so that I only need to buy 2 cans.
Yeah.
To be to be gone.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll buy something that's got more caffeine than you can possibly handle, plus more alcohol than is absolutely necessary. It tastes horrible, but I'll buy the same number of it. It doesn't matter. It's not made a blind bit of difference. The target of minimum unit alcohol pricing has done absolutely nothing. If anything, I would say it's definitely, as you can see, it's making things worse. It's not. There's much more of it, I would say, than there ever has been before.
Yeah, the answer to cocaine or heroin addiction is not make them pay more.
No.
No. If you are addicted to a substance, they will find a way to make that work. It's
exactly,
and you will send them deeper into debt and deeper into isolation by doing so. It's
crazy.
A truly absurd policy as far as I can tell.
It's my favourite phrase here, mate. It's education. Like I keep coming back to this point, and it's the point that I've said it already, but obviously, if you didn't know, I'm going to say it, boys, because it's not been said so far. But if you didn't know, I work in the drinks industry, right? So sorry, I had it in the bingo card tonight, boys, and I was waiting on it, and that's the one for my last line. So,
did you know?
Did you? The point I get is I'm doing a bit of education at the moment myself about non-alcoholic beer coming up for January and all the rest of it. And the point I'm trying to make is I done kind of like a focus group last week and 2 weeks ago, punters, different bars and all the rest of it. And see the amount of people that would just say to me, "What's the point? It doesn't get you drunk." And I'm like, but my point back to you is about you. Okay, if you get drunk off drinking beer, that's one of the byproducts, and and there is sometimes there is sometimes a nice feeling about that, and that's what you aim for. But from my point of view, is I drink beer because I enjoy the taste of beer, and this is what I'm trying to explain to people. And like you were trying to say, is like the UK's philosophy at the moment on drinking, I think, is based around that. It's like, how quickly can you get drunk, or how do you get pissed off it, or whatever it is. And it's like, I'll have 10 pints, and whereas I think when you're talking about Germany and Czech Republic and things, like, drinking beer is, like, it's part of the growing up culture. It's, like, the young lads and girls and that get beer when they're 14, 15, 16, and it's not to get pished. It's because it's built into the culture, and it's social. It's having a couple of beers with your family, with your friends, with, and that social aspect that you're saying. It's bringing communities and families and everything together. Whereas, I had these two separate conversations with two different groups, and the message I got back was, what's the point? I want to get drunk. And you're sort of like, this is where we need to start, like, educating, like, if it is, like, if it's in school, if it's in focus groups, if it's whatever it is about, there's, like, ways of breaking down this. And anyway, that's my soapbox. I am trying not to go too mental on this, but I just find it, like you say, and back to your book, because that's what we're talking about here, is that for me it's about that, like, educating people of, like, the benefits of beer in the wider society, and not just as a tool to get drunk and
I mean, I think that I would never judge somebody who drinks to get drunk. I did that at school and university. That was the fun of it. And I've definitely, getting into the channel, when we first started the channel, we were drinking too much, for sure, for our health. But we were young guys and young, I like to think, responsible, nice humans who didn't get ourselves into the kind of trouble that occasionally alcohol can get you into. But definitely in the last couple of years, pre-COVID, but probably enhanced a bit by COVID, we have more than ever fallen into that. We drink just, for that flavor, for that very mild buzz. And now when I wake up in the morning and I've had 4 pints and I'm struggling, I'm angry at myself and I'm pissed off. And I think that, people could sort of pick up on what you're saying and go, like, you can try to educate these people, but they're never going to change. But I think that pretty much everybody changes. And if they don't change, then they don't necessarily have a healthy relationship with alcohol. Mm-hmm. I think that we all slowly get educated as to the dangers, the issues, and the responsibilities of our lives that alcohol doesn't necessarily fit into. And what would be great is to accelerate that education, like I think Europe does a better job of doing, certainly France and Germany, where you're introduced to alcohol much younger in small quantities, in food settings, in festival settings, where everybody is very mildly buzzed and utterly unbothered by it. And we don't really have that culture in the UK. You go to a drinking establishment outside of a pub from Monday to maybe Wednesday, you don't have those environments where people are enjoying the flavor, enjoying the social. There is too much of a focus on getting drunk. And it has improved since, say, the 90s and early 2000s, and it will continue to improve. And I think that we also need to take stock of that and go, things probably are going in the right direction.
Yeah.
But the support is not necessarily there for those that aren't able to, function.
No. You've kind of answered this question almost. I'm going to ask it anyway. Fuck it. Like, how has your kind of personal relationship with beer evolved over the years through your writing and your filmmaking, along with Brad and stuff, and how has that developed over the years, and even so your research through just doing this book?
It's really interesting. I chat to, when I first got into beer, when I first started the channel, so got into writing about beer, it was very much a try everything you can. You look back at some of the early videos on the Craft Beer channel, we're pretty far gone, and we're having a lot of fun. But it doesn't make comfortable viewing to me now, and both mine and Brad's. I don't want to talk to Brad's reasons for it. That's very much down to him. But definitely, Brad and my consumption has dropped dramatically, and a huge amount of his interest has shifted towards, like, the travel and the people that we get to meet as a result of this, and a huge amount of my interest has shifted to the cultural and the societal impact of brewing and of alcohol. And it means that, I will, people often ask me, like, what beer's always in your fridge? And I say Lucky Saint. That's the only constant in my fridge. Everything else is, well, I mean, next to, the 400 fucking Imperial stuff. It's Lucky Saint, because I think it's a decent beer. It gives me the hit Monday to Thursday of that, that cigarette to your mouth kind of ritual kind of feeling. And it's a good enough flavor, and that's definitely changed. But I think the other thing that I have really shifted, other than reducing the amount of alcohol, is really appreciating what I drink more and being a little bit more. A lot of the beers that I drain pour beers constantly, and
Wow.
I don't often admit that. Like, I would say when I'm drinking at home, Friday or Saturday night, I might have 2 drinks, but I will drain pour 6 or 7 because
Wow.
I'm looking for something truly educational, interesting, exciting, unusual, and I'll have a sip and I will go, nah, that's not what I'm feeling. And it's an absurd level of privilege because I have a 450 fucking beers I need to get through. But yeah, it means that I'm almost more than ever, even more than when I started, I'm looking for something unique and exciting. And we get sent all these samples. I'm surrounded by endless fucking samples of beer from breweries that I wouldn't necessarily pick up.
Yeah.
Some Innocent Gun up there, which I would never buy. And I will crack open all these things and I will try them because, at some point some of these breweries do significant things. But I definitely tip away more beer than I drink, which is a weird state to be in. But it is because, I'm having 2 beers in a night and I want them to be... I want to take something away other than the buzz.
I actually, I think, it's controversial, I suppose, because you're throwing beer away and there's time, effort that's went into them. And I think, what you say, you're in that privileged position. Some of the listeners that we speak to that listen into your podcast are new into the craft beer journey, and it's something that we're kind of helping them along that route, and they'll be thinking, God, I can't believe you're throwing this beer away. But I think the important part is that there is sometimes where you open something and you think, oh, it's going to be exactly what I want, and it's not. And I know, Gil, you've talked about this before, especially on a can, that you want to be able to reseal the can and, for another day. And, you take your 2-3 sips out of it and you reseal the can and it's tight, air fresh and all the rest of it, and be able to put it in. I know that's not the case, and you can do it with a bottle. But I think it's an important message, mate. At the end of the day, you're in that position. You've got beers. There's sometimes a certain beer is exactly what you're looking for, and it might be Innocent Gun that night. Highly doubtful, but at the same time, it might. There might be. But fair play, and you're looking, and I think that is the message that you come back to is, I'm drinking for 2 spectacular beers on a Friday and a Saturday night, and if I need to go through 8 beers to find those 2, then that's how you roll. And
spectacular can be. I mean, at the moment in Sainsbury's, Spartan, arguably, along with Carlsberg, the most important brewery in the world, you can get their Hellers in Sainsbury's to 3 for £6. And sometimes that is the spectacular beer that I'm looking for, because it's just
exactly.
Hellers. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it is, an absurd Imperial Stout is what I'm hankering for.
There is a time and a place for every single beer, though. Like every beer, and I know Gav, we joke. Gav's a huge Tennent's man, and he lives and dies by Tennent's.
Time and a place for that. What do you reckon?
There you go.
Oh yes. Goodness gracious.
There you go.
I'm not wild about Pete, so that Lefroy one, that's going to take a while to crack open.
I was going to say that's.
I'll
Get
get you a
on
nice
that
bottle.
before that goes open.
I'll get you a nice bottle of a barrel-aged Scottish brewery that's got beer in a whiskey barrel, and I'll send it to you, and you can definitely drink that one because it's come from me. But I know.
Oh, here he goes. Fucking Christ.
Plug.
Did you know I work for a brewery? Fucking.
Oh, well,
already-
and I know
I've
we want to wrap up because I don't want to keep you for a million years. You visited all these places, went through all these. We talked about the soybean train journey. We spoke about like the one of the things. Obviously, it's in the I think the moon underwater as well, but not just for the writing of the book and the research period of the book because we spoke about Beer Door already. Best pint or drink through the research process. Where was the most reverential pint, if you like? All the places and you thought, I'm in history. This is me. I'm in it. I'm walking the ground, as we have ways guys would say, or rest is history. I'm walking. This is me walking I'm walking the turf. I'm in it. Type of pint. That kind of reverential where you feel like it's like you're kind of spinning around, looking at yourself like this is where I'm supposed to be right now, having this particular beer.
I mean, honestly, so many examples of that writing the book. Like this has been the adventure of a lifetime, really, to do this. The places that I've been, Svalbard, Egypt, St. Louis, China.
The Radisson Blue in Svalbard.
The Radisson Blue in Svalbard. Yeah, wasn't there. I'll have to give. What? So the first answer, weirdly, is so I went to. It's called the Winter Palace. It's sort of the fancy hotel in Luxor, Egypt, which is where Death on the Nile was written by Agatha Christie. It's just
Wow.
one of those places that just drips with history the moment you see it. Partly because I'm a big fan of trashy murder mysteries anyway. I'm just a big fan of trashy fiction, essentially. Going into there and seeing that, and I explored pretending I couldn't find the bar. Just went for a fucking walk around the hotel, being like, "Oh, where's it? I can't just so that I could see a bit more of it." But eventually, I settled. I sat outside. I drank a Egyptian Stella, which is an entirely different company. Bang average, basic rice lager, but I remember I was sat there. I was looking out, the sun setting over the Nile. I was writing down notes on my phone, drinking this Stella from a Kolsch glass. I mean, it wasn't a Kolsch glass; it was just a weird tall glass, but it felt like a Kolsch glass. And I looked down at my feet, and my shoes were a different color. Like they were brown leather boots, but they'd gone beige. And I looked because that day I'd been exploring Abydos. I'd been to where the brewery is. And I just looked and I was like, that sand. Every time I put those boots on, I'm like, there's sand on there that, has been in that region for 5,000 years and has sat above these incredible historic things that, 5,000 years ago, who'd have known that a fucking YouTuber would have come and talked about it. That was a very, very sort of special moment. And it was also because of that experience of like going out into the desert with the guy with the gun. Like that was the first really hardcore travel I think I'd ever done. And I just felt like I was doing something unique. And that beer will always stay in my mind. There's a picture on my Instagram of me talking about it. The other thing I would say is actually the bit that got cut from the book, the bit I was talking about where I went to Dovetail Brewery in Chicago and I was drinking their double decocted Hellas. So absolutely stunning beer. And then I had the Kolsch, I had the Hefeweizen, all world-class beers, and sat there with one of their brewers, just drinking through the menu and thinking about everything that I'd learned, all the history that I'd learned, but also just how even if you remove the history, when you have a beer that good, you don't need, sort of the Budweiser effect of being like, holy shit, this is an important brewery. It's just like, this brewery's 10 years old and they're making lager better than anywhere I've tasted, but they're only making it because of the Germanic diaspora that happened 150 years ago. And sat there drinking that was very special as well. And if anybody's ever in Chicago, Dovetail would be my top tip. And then Lachette's, that also didn't make the book. It's like a really old school German bar, like kind of the last vestiges of like the German saloons that were all the rage in the 1800s, is a super fucking cool place as well. So yeah, that Hellas at Dovetail is probably the other time where I was like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this and to drink this, and I'm just very sorry to the head brewer who's I assume thinks they're going to be in the book and will brutally get cut in about a year's time.
Oh, amazing stuff! Amazing stuff. We are thoroughly enjoying the book. We've not made it all the way through, but looking forward to the chapters that are to come.
Last chapter's the worst, mate. I've already said it, so don't worry about it.
For everyone listening at the podcast, Johnny, where is the best place for people to grab hold of the book?
Well, first hit subscribe on the Beer Fridge podcast, and then I would go to David's bookstore. Just put David's bookstore Letchworth into Google, and you can get signed copies from a local, independent, amazing bookstore delivered anywhere in the world. That or the Big A.
Good.
But fuck 'em.
Fuck that. Independent bookstores everywhere. Independent. That's the key. Whether it's beer or books, it's got to be
Indeed.
independent.
Has it got the indie stamp on it? Has it?
Do you know, I attended the Independent Booksellers Alliance conference. Was in a room with Richard Ariadne, and
Wow.
genuinely, at that conference they have the same conversations that we do about beer, the same, very important moralizing, but I think debates as well. Where does Waterstones fit into all of this and stuff like that? But we should be supporting our independent bookstores because, as I've learned through working with David's, they do incredible community work, societal work, and one of the last bastions of the classic high street. So support your indie bookstores.
Yeah, if you definitely first place is search your local bookstore, go and grab it there. If you can't, by all means, get it online. There's plenty of places. Not going to name them all because there's fucking too many. But go and search it. We are thoroughly enjoying it. It's even if you're just like we said, even if you just enjoy like macro lager, this is a book for everyone who just, I think that as soon as I knew you were writing this and you published it and it came out, my first thought went to Scott because he is a massive history buff, and I was like, this is right up his street. History, beer, I was like, he's going to fucking love this. So even if you love history, go and grab it. Love beer, go and grab it. You will not be disappointed. I think I can safely say I can talk for all three of us.
Yeah, it's a Rest is History episode about beer. Just in long form.
That's the
excellent.
best fucking compliment you could give me.
It's superb. It's really good, and I'm listening to the audio.
Now you can put that on a t-shirt, Johnny.
Yeah, well, I fucking will. I'll tattoo it on my face. I've got enough space.
It's really good. It's the Chatham High Street of beer. We're waiting for on the Rest is History. That's one for the true Athelstans. There you go. It's excellent. It's even reading it. It's conversational. You can kind of chip in with stuff. It's approachable. It's not too in depth. Obviously, like you've said, you're a beer guy, not necessarily a scientist, although you've learned a hell of a lot, obviously. But it touches on things. You learn stuff. You pick up on things and even anecdotes to talk about. You're obviously coming up to the festive period. If you want an anecdote to talk about when all things go silent at the Christmas dinner table or whatever.
When your nan's being racist, just be like, did you know that St Pancras was construction mostly for beer?
Yeah, exactly. You can just throw a fact in there every now and again. Or if you're desperate to get back to Call of Duty on the PlayStation and want to send a few people off to just go in, not necessarily the beer drinkers amongst you, just rattle off a few beer facts and you're good to go. It's absolutely superb. I'm really enjoying it.
Thanks,
it's incredible. But buy the book so you must buy the book so you can do it. You must buy the book so you can do it.
How the fuck did you squeeze in Call of Duty in that?
Well, there we go. That's it. Well, I was going to say Farming Simulator and an ode to the soybeans, but no, we'll not go there. That's
just you that likes Farming Simulator.
Yeah,
that's just
it's a depth too low. I totally perked up when you mentioned soybeans. Funnily
No,
enough.
you did.
Oh, you're like, oh yeah, I know a bit about that.
That's
Well,
it.
you need to get yourself a train from Chicago to St. Louis. You'll have fucking dull time.
Soybeans.
All the links of where you can get the book will be below in the description, whether it's where you're listening or you're watching on YouTube. Go and grab the book; you'll not be disappointed. It's a fantastic read, and we're thoroughly enjoying it. Jonny, can't thank you enough for joining us on the podcast. It's been lovely to have you on for the third time, which is always nice. For myself and all the boys, I appreciate it. And to all you guys listening, if you haven't done already, give us a 5-star rating. Much appreciated. That's your unofficial support. If you want to show your official support, go to patreon.com/Be Your Fridge Podcast, where you can show your official support to get every single episode early and get some homebrew from the guys as well. Hit the ding-a-ling-a-ling. Make sure you subscribe to be notified of every single episode. For myself, Gav, MD, and Scotty, appreciate it, Jonny. And until next time, bye.
Hello.